any items, perhaps when the body is removed, it's possible that an article might have been left behind and would subsequently be brought to the coroner's office at a later date.
Yes.
But also, it's possible that if a body such as Ms. Forston is removed by members of the coroner's office, that other things might accompany the body. For instance, various articles of clothing that may have been on top of the body.
Yes.
And you would see this when you go to the viewing the following day and more or less unwrap whatever you have in front of you.
Correct.
And when it comes to articles that we've talked about, important articles, let's talk about any of the ligatures that were removed from the necks of any of these victims, okay?
Okay.
And they range from pieces of cloth and in all of these items, the ligatures, whatever they were, are they somewhat covered or attached to decomposition matter?
Yes.
Does that affect your ability to do any further testing on these things? Or so, what kind of tests could you do on these ligatures?
Not too much beyond what's indicated in the reports. We don't really make real viable DNA samples.
And why is that?
Because they're covered in decomp.
And we'll have people from DNA explain that in due time. But you as a forensic scientist, are you pretty much limited as to what, quote, no further testing is done because there's no other testing as a forensic scientist that you can do on that art? Or do you disagree with that?
It could be that there's no further testing that can be done, or it could be an item based on the case information wouldn't provide any probative information.
All right, but I believe each and every one of the ligatures that were taken from the body, whether they were around the neck, whether they were around the wrist, whether they were around the ankles of any particular victim, there was no further testing done.
That's correct.
And the reason for that was what, if any?
Well, it was my decision at the time that the condition of the ligatures was such that a viable DNA sample, trying to get something other than the victim, wasn't going to happen.
All right, and this is based on your professional experience.
Yes.
Processed a lot of this stuff over the years, many homicide scenes.
Unfortunately, yes.
All right, so again, I mean, you use your experience in making judgments as to how far you go with any particular item. This is what you're paid to do. Is that correct?
Ultimately, yes.
And in every homicide, okay, that you work on, ultimately you will prepare a trace evidence report.
Yes.
And in any crime or active case, you would expect your trace evidence report to be shared with defense attorneys and stuff like that?
That's the reason it's produced.
All right. And just generally speaking, if I'm a defense attorney on a case representing someone charged with a homicide, if I came to the court, could I come and discuss this with you?
Yes.
Your findings?
You could.
All right. And furthermore, if I made a request that I would like to have something tested, would you do it?
Objection. Overruled.
Would you do it?
Objection. Overruled.
We would do the testing, or we would agree to a mutually acceptable independent laboratory for the testing.
Okay, one or the other.
Correct.
All right, so if I came and wanted to question you on any item on report number, case number 2140, on any of these 160 so items, I could come to you and say, Mr. Jones, there was no further testing done here. We would like this to be done. Would you see that it could be done if that request would be made?
Objection.
Overruled.
Yes.
Either your laboratory or an independent laboratory.
Objection.
Overruled.
Yes.
And has that been done in the past?
Objection.
Overruled.
In the past,
Yeah.
I've met with defense attorneys on past cases. There's been agreements, even court orders, to send samples out to be tested or retested
All right.
at other laboratories.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jones. That was terrific.
Thank you. You recross.
Yes, sir. Now, sir, with respect to these ligatures, let's talk about these ligatures for a moment. You took careful documentation of these ligatures in your reports, correct?
The photographs, yes.
And photographs as well. And I think you testified earlier, with respect to DNA, you just need a very small sample of an item to test it for DNA, correct?
Well,
It doesn't take very much biological material to test for DNA. Fair enough.
the DNA testing capabilities are very sensitive.
Of course, but if an item, let's say a ligature that's wrapped around someone's neck, a decomposed body, that's taken off, you took that off, several of them, correct?
Yes.
You photographed them several months later, correct?
Yes.
We have those photographs, they've been introduced, correct?
Yes.
All right. And there are sections of the ligature that, to the visual eye, do not have decom material.
There may be some more clean than other areas.
All right. And the bottom line is, you have to test it to see if there's anything there. Fair enough?
Well, with touch DNA, that's really, you have to test it to see if there's any DNA present.
Right. I mean, you can't visually determine whether there's DNA present, correct?
Not on a touch sample, no.
And if someone is using their bare hands with a ligature to strangle someone to death, there certainly could be their DNA on those ligatures, correct?
Well, potentially, yes.
I mean, you don't know until you test it, correct?
You wouldn't know, that's correct.
All right. And none of the ligatures, from the neck, from the wrist, from the ankles, none of those ligatures were sent away for testing, correct?
That's right, none were.
Not even an attempt to gain evidence off those ligatures, correct?
I don't even know where I would have sampled those ligatures to send for DNA testing.
I'm sorry?
I don't know where I would have even sampled on those ligatures to send off for DNA
Right, but
testing.
there wasn't even an attempt to me. Fair enough?
No samples were collected, no.
All right. Now, with respect to this crime scene, somewhat of a unique crime scene. Fair enough?
Something I hope I never have to do again.
Certainly. It's a bit overwhelming at times.
It was large in scale.
Yes. And you would agree that it should be handled with great care and caution right from the moment a body is discovered, correct?
Yes,
You did not arrive on the scene until November 3rd, approximately 5-6 days after the first bodies were found, correct?
correct.